I'm very pleased to have been invited to offer a greeting and bring the Bible reading this morning. It's been a tough year for many of us and in different ways. While it is nearly 7 years since I left what was then called Chelsea Parish, I've never forgotten my time with you. As Advent and Christmas approaches, may we know God's gifts of peace, hope and love. A love for God, for one another, and a love for your communities. Our reading is from Matthew chapter 22, verses 15 to 22. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere, and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. In this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks, Neil, for that reading and for that greeting. Reverend Neil Peters was the minister here at Chelsea, or Uniting by the Bay, for 9 years, and I know he was much loved minister and loved being with you. Neil read to us a passage which, on the surface, seems to be about taxes, the taxes that the people of Israel had to pay to the hated Roman Empire. Well, partly on the surface it was about that, but actually it's about something way more important. It's about who you are and whose you are, whose image is on you, on your life. When you think about images, we're surrounded by them. You look at the mirror in the morning and see an image, not quite yourself, but sometimes it gives you a shock. Maybe you're looking at photos or paintings. Or here on our blinds there's images just reminding us of things. And sometimes, especially with paintings, those images help us to get to what is that's really about, a deep insight. Well, we'll come back to that. Let's come back to what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 22. Now, first of all, remember the situation then. The people of Israel were under the control of the Roman Empire. They were an incredibly powerful dictatorship. You didn't get a choice about them being in charge, and they were as powerful as a dictatorship as the world has seen. No voting for them, you were just told. They were in charge, their army was in charge, and you paid the taxes they said. Well, naturally, the proud people of Israel hated being controlled by the Roman Emperor, and they hated having to send taxes to the Roman Empire. So, the Pharisees, religious leaders of Israel, thought they would trap Jesus by asking him whether it's lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not. So they knew that the people of Israel hated to pay these taxes. So if Jesus said it was okay to pay taxes, he offended the people. If he said not to pay, he'd be in deep trouble with the empire. So Jesus reaches into his pocket. Jesus takes the coin, he shows it to them, and he asks, whose image is on this? Well, just as you'd find the Queen's image on this one, on their coin, it was the emperor's. And so Jesus points out that if you take Caesar's coin, you shouldn't be surprised if there's a price to pay. So he says, give to the emperor what is the emperor's, and give to God what is God's. Now they would have had to think about that for a minute. And sometimes some of them would have thought, oh, give to God the spiritual side of life. And they would have been quite wrong. Because the God that Jesus was talking about, the God that we worship, is the creator of everything. He's the creator of everything, and that means that everything comes under God's control. And he asked them, so where do you find the image of God? And they, knowing the Old Testament, would have known it's on human beings. Human beings are created in the image of God. It means that not only are we created by God, that we're loved by God, and that in some ways we're in the image of God. That doesn't mean that God is a human being. It means that somehow in us there is something that relates to God, that we're created for fellowship with God. And that's really vital for us to remember. When you're down or thinking that you're of no worth or value, remember, you and I are created in the image of God. God's image is on your life. It means that we're more than flesh and bones. Within us is a part that longs to be in a relationship with the God who created us. Now it also means too that those dictators or powerful leaders are created by God. They're loved by God, which is sometimes hard to imagine, but they are. But it means that the emperor is not all powerful. One day the Roman Empire would crumble and Christianity became dominant. One day the Roman emperor would bow his knees to Jesus and to God. It means that those proud dictators around the world, whether in Russia or China or North Korea, they are not all powerful. They too were created by God and are under the oversight of God. And one day, they too, their rule will crumble. We had a lot of relationships with the Protestant church in East Timor and with the people of East Timor during their long rule of nearly 30 years by the Indonesians. And you remember that there was a resistance movement, a very powerful one of the Timorese people led by Xanana Gusmao. Now, the governor of East Timor, an Indonesian man of course, an Indonesian general, happened to be a Protestant and member of the East Timorese Protestant Church. One day, the moderator of the Protestant Church, an East Timorese man, came to see the governor and said, "Governor, we need peace in this country. I know that Xanana Gusmao is near to here with his forces, and I want you to make peace with Xanana and his forces so that we can have peace in our land." And the governor said, "I don't need to make peace. I have 5 battalions arriving from Indonesia." And the moderator looked at the governor and he said, "General, it does not matter how many battalions you have on Judgment Day." Do you understand what he was saying? He was pointing to the real ruler of East Timor, which was not Indonesia or the governor, the general. The real ruler of the world is God. And one day, things would change. Well, in fact, it didn't take that many years before Indonesia left and East Timor became free. We pray for the freedom of all who live under dictatorship. We pray that each person may know that they're worthwhile, that they're loved by God and created in the image of God. And to remind you, being created in the image of God means there's something of God within us that longs to be back in fellowship with God. The God who knows us, understands us, and longs to be in that loving relationship. So we're going to listen to a song this morning. It's a beautiful song. It's based on another psalm, and it's to music you'll love as well. "Search me, O God, and know my heart." Search me, O God. Thank you to Lee Newton who sings it. and thank you for being with us today.
Search me, O God, and know my anxious heart. Behind me and before me, you lay your hand upon me. Where might I hide to flee your tender touch? No darkness or the ocean hides me from your devotion. You know my every need. You know my thoughts, my joy, my crying. God, your wisdom ways surround me at my birth, my dying. Woven by you deep in my mother's womb, that moment of conception, you knew my life's direction. Search me, O God, and purify my ways. Oh, teach me love surpassing, guide me in all that's lasting. You know my every need. You know my thoughts, my joy, my crying. God, your wisdom ways surround me at my birth, my dying. Search me, O God, and know my anxious heart. Behind me and before me, you